Not many people would know that the very first time a computer was used to play music was way back in the early 1950s, and even less would guess that it happened in Sydney, Australia. It's a fact that has been largely ignored, yet most, if not all of us, listen to music on a computer or a device that is effectively a computer. Now it's become our primary music playing technology here in the 21st century. So it seems like it's a great time to tell you all about this amazing story of the birth of computer music. And what better way than to use an AI voice to do the storytelling? The first programmers of the CSIR Mark I were Jeff Hill and Trevor Pearcey. Jeff Hill had perfect pitch and came from a very musical family. Hill was the first person to program the CSIR Mark I to play a musical melody. It was played publicly for the first public exhibition of the computer on the 7th to 9th of August in 1951 at the inaugural Conference of Automatic Computing Machines in Sydney. The sound production technique used on the CSIR Mark I was as crude as is possible to imagine on a computer. Raw pulses of the computer's data words were sent to an audio amplifier with a speaker attached. However, this occurred when there were no digital to analog converters, there was no digital audio practice, and little in the way of complete digital audio theories. In addition, the CSIR Mark I produced music in real time. The musical pieces played by the CSIR Mark I are not as musically inspiring as they might have been if composers had been involved in creating the music. The computer had a lot to offer composers of the time. Any frequency and any rhythm could have been programmed so the many composers interested in microtonal works or music with no rhythm or very complex rhythms could have created some very interesting music. Now, the music is most interesting from the point of view of the application of computers to music as a general principle and for the early practice of computer programming to create music. The achievement is significant because of the imagination of the practitioners, to conceive of using the flexibility of a digital computer to make music, and because of the ingenuity required to produce reliable sounds from the computer. It is difficult to appreciate now just how skillful these people were. It is significant that it was only two of the best programmers who managed to program the CSIR Mark I to play music. The CSIR Mark I operated in Sydney, Australia from about November 1949 to June 1955. Jeff Hill was the main programmer at that time, and he used the machine to play musical melodies. These melodies, mostly from popular songs, were Colonel Bogey, Bonnie Banks, Girl with Flaxen Hair, and so on. The CSIR Mark I was dismantled in mid-1955 and moved to the University of Melbourne, where it was renamed CIRAC. Professor of Mathematics Thomas Cherry, later Sir Thomas Cherry FRS, had a great interest in programming and music, and he created music with CIRAC. In Melbourne, the practice of how CIRAC was programmed for music was altered and refined somewhat. The program tapes for a couple of test scales still exist, along with the popular melodies So Early in the Morning and In Cellar Cool, which was a popular drinking song. It appears that the pursuit of computer music and social drinking have been intimately linked since the earliest years. There was also other music on the tape. In about 1957, Cherry wrote a music performance program that would allow a computer user who understood simple standard music notation to enter it easily into CIRAC for performance, without negotiating all of the timing problems such as was normally required. The music itself may now seem very crude unless it is understood in the context of its creation. It was created by engineers who were not knowledgeable of the latest in musical composition practice, and at a time when there was little thought of digital sound. The idea of using a computer, the world's most flexible machine, to create music was a leap of imagination at the time. It is a pity that composers were not invited to use CIRAC, as they were with the Bell Labs developments, to discover how it could have solved several compositional problems. Another fascinating physical dimension of CIRAC was the method of storing memory in the form of mercury delay lines. The results of the day's calculations could be stored, but only as long as the power was on. It was a novel form of memory brought across from developments in radar technology. Long tubes filled with mercury were not very safe or practical. Other methods, such as magnetic drums, were more commonly used. CIRAC used both. This highlights the pioneering nature of the work. Trevor Pearcey, Maston Beard, and Jeff Hill had to invent ways of doing things. They had to plan out how they wanted it to function, then build it from individual components. The protocols for how it would work, how information came in and was processed, and how the results came out were established by these pioneers and others working on similar projects, such as ENIAC at the University of Pennsylvania, EDSAC at the University of Cambridge, and MADM at the Victoria University of Manchester. The fundamental architecture of computers was established at this time. So why did CIRAC survive while these other first-generation computers did not? As large experimental machines sometimes used for classified research, the early computers were often dismantled, reconfigured, or disposed of at the end of their use. CIRAC's life was extended by its time at the University of Melbourne, where it was used for a broad range of purposes as well as being a teaching tool. Unlike the other machines, CIRAC had champions people who had worked with CIRAC or had a personal connection to it and had the foresight to ensure it was preserved. After running its last program in 1964, it was donated to the Institute of Applied Science, now Museums Victoria. CIRAC's name is derived from Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Automatic Computer. When it was built, CIRAC was at the cutting edge of the new field of computing. Parallel projects were happening in the UK and USA as the world was emerging from the secrecy of World War II when early computers were developed for military purposes. CIRAC is so large because the electronic switches, which it used to compute, are vacuum tubes, and CIRAC has 2,000 arranged in banks connected with a mass of wires. The subsequent stage of computing used transistors as switches. Transistors were invented in 1947 and put the properties of semiconductors to work as switches. They can be made much smaller than valves and connected together into integrated circuits. These circuits were used in computers from the mid-1960s, and the trend of miniaturization continued. CIRAC was a large and energy-hungry beast. It had a certain hum and smell when it ran. It didn't work well on hot days. It required skilled minders to keep it running. When they suspected a faulty valve, the way to find it was to encourage it to fail completely by tapping on each valve in turn with a little rubber valve donger. The machine was fairly representative of first-generation valve-driven computer designs. It used mercury acoustic delay lines as its primary data storage, with a typical capacity of 768 20-bit words, supplemented by a parallel disk-type device with a total 4,096-word capacity and an access time of 10 milliseconds. Its memory clock ran at 1,000 Hz, and the control unit, synchronized to the clock, took 2 cycles to execute an instruction. Later, the speed was doubled to 1 cycle per instruction. The bus, termed the digit trunk in their design, is unusual compared to most computers in that it was serial. It transferred 1 bit at a time. Most of CIRAC's approximately 2,000 valves were of the types 6SN7, 6V6, EA50 diodes, and KT66. George Semke later redesigned the drum-red electronics to use germanium transistors. Input to the machine was performed in the form of punched 3-inch wide, 12-track paper tape. After experiments with punch cards proved unsatisfactory, the machine was controlled through a console, which allowed programs to be stepped through 1 instruction at a time, and featured CRT displays which showed the contents of registers. Output was through a standard teleprinter or to punch tape. The instruction set supported the basic set of arithmetic and logical operations, as well as conditional and relative jumps, making it possible to write a library of subroutines. The machine, like all machines of the era, had no operating system. A high-level interpreted programming language called Interprogram was developed in 1960 by Jeff Hill. It was similar to early forms of BASIC, which was designed in 1963 for the 20-bit transistorized GE200 series. Programming was also very physical, with the programs punched as holes into paper tape. There was a library of commonly used subprograms that could be used, but researchers had to figure out how to program the unique aspects of their research calculation in order to get the work done using CIRAC. Today, we are seeing a resurgence of interest in hands-on computing. With the advent of the maker movement, people are once again enthusiastically building and programming their own computers. We are in a second age of do-it-yourself computing with people who are self-taught and creating things we couldn't have previously imagined. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this podcast about the Cyrac computer and its amazing role as the first computer to make audible music. We'll now listen to the four pieces of music that were recreated using the Cyrac. The very first computer music played at the 1951 conference was not recorded at the time, so all we have are these recreated pieces. Although they sound pretty terrible when compared to the computer-generated music that would follow, it's no less remarkable to think that they were the primal ancestors of pretty much all modern audio and music as we know it in the 21st century. And even the AI-generated voice that was used to make this podcast. Thanks for listening. We will continue to bring you more fascinating podcasts about the people, technology, and ideas that have helped shape the modern world. Bye for now.